My boyfriend said he needed space to focus on himself. 3 days later, his roommate sent me screenshots showing he was secretly ranking multiple women, and I was listed as the safe option. My name is Natalie Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and a few weeks ago, I thought my life was moving in exactly the direction I wanted. Ryan and I had been together for 2 years, long enough that we'd stopped talking about whether we had a future and started assuming we did. We weren't planning a wedding or shopping for houses yet, but we were well past the stage where either of us questioned where the relationship was going. At least I was. Looking back, there were warning signs. The problem is that warning signs rarely look obvious when you're living through them. Ryan had become harder to reach. Date nights were canceled more often. Conversations that used to last an hour were suddenly over in 10 minutes. Whenever I asked what was wrong, Ryan always seemed to have an explanation. Work was stressful, the new position demanded more of his time, and he claimed he was constantly exhausted. And because I cared about him, I accepted those explanations. The truth is that Ryan hadn't always been distant. One of the reasons I ignored my growing doubts was because I kept comparing the present version of him to the man I'd known before. The man who used to bring dinner to my office when I worked late. The man who remembered my mother's birthday without reminders. The man who somehow always knew when I was having a bad day before I said a word. That version of Ryan was the reason I stayed patient. The text message arrived on a Thursday evening. I had just gotten home from work. My bag was still hanging from my shoulder when my phone buzzed. I smiled automatically when I saw Ryan's name. Then I opened the message. Hey, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. I need space to focus on myself right now. Please don't contact me for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. I hope you understand. I read it several times, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood it. I hadn't. What bothered me wasn't just the message itself. It was how carefully it avoided saying what was actually happening. Ryan never said we were breaking up. He never said he wanted to end things. He just asked for space and left me standing in the middle of a conversation he clearly didn't want to have. The more I looked at it, the more it felt like someone keeping a door half open while they decided whether they wanted to come back through it. Part of me wanted to call him immediately. Part of me wanted answers. Instead, I remembered something my father used to say. If someone wants to walk away, don't chase them down the street. So I replied with a single sentence. Take all the time you need. Then I put my phone away and spent the entire weekend pretending I was handling it better than I actually was. I cleaned my apartment, reorganized closets that didn't need reorganizing, started movies I barely paid attention to, anything that kept me from staring at my phone. Saturday night, my best friend Samantha met me for drinks. After listening to the whole story, she frowned. That doesn't sound like someone who needs space. What does it sound like? She took a sip of her drink before answering. Like someone buying time. The comment stayed with me long after we left the bar. Buying time for what? At that point, I didn't know. A small part of me suspected I wouldn't like the answer. By Monday morning, I was trying to convince myself to move on. Then I received an Instagram message from someone I barely knew. The account belonged to Ryan's roommate, Lauren. We'd crossed paths a few times over the years. She was polite but quiet, usually disappearing into her room whenever I visited. We'd never had a real conversation, which made her message feel immediately strange. Hi, I know this is weird. A second message followed almost immediately. We don't know each other very well, but I think you deserve to know what's actually happening. My stomach tightened. Before I could respond, another message appeared. I've watched this for 2 months and I can't stay quiet anymore. Then she sent screenshots. At first, I thought there had to be some misunderstanding. The messages were between Ryan and a contact saved as Mom. But the conversation didn't sound anything like a conversation between a mother and son. It sounded like Ryan talking openly with a friend he trusted. And what he was saying made me physically sick. And a message read, Woman number 1 is sweet, but she's still in grad school. No real income yet. Another, Woman number 2 has a great corporate job. Honestly, kind of boring though. Then another, Woman number 3 is gorgeous, but I can't see a long-term future there. A few messages later, my name appeared. Natalie has a stable career, good apartment. She's loyal. The next line hit harder than everything else combined. She's the safe option. I read the sentence twice. Then I read it again. 2 years together. And that was how Ryan described me. Not his girlfriend. Not the woman he wanted a future with. Just the safe option. I kept reading. Ryan wasn't taking time to focus on himself. He was dating multiple women at the same time, comparing every relationship as if he were evaluating different options before making a final decision. The screenshots revealed months of deception. According to Lauren, he had been carefully scheduling dates, managing stories, and making sure none of us crossed paths. Then I reached the message that explained everything. I told Natalie I need space to focus on myself. She bought it immediately. Now I can figure out which option gives me the best future. The last few weeks suddenly looked very different. Looking back, the canceled plans, delayed replies, and mysteriously unavailable weekends all pointed toward the same explanation. None of it had been random. Lauren sent another message. He's been rotating between all of you. Then another. None of the others know about each other. A few seconds later, she added, I'm moving out next month. I can't keep watching this. I sat quietly for a long time after that. Outside my apartment window, traffic continued moving. People walked down the sidewalk. Somewhere in the hallway, somebody laughed. Everything around me looked normal. My life no longer felt that way. Just before the conversation ended, Lauren sent one final message. If you want to know who the other women are, I can tell you. I looked at the screen and already knew the answer. Whatever happened next wasn't going to be simple. And Ryan had absolutely no idea that the version of reality he'd spent months carefully managing was about to start falling apart. Lauren sent me 3 profiles that same night. I had never met any of those women, yet our lives had become connected without any of us realizing it. I clicked on the first profile. The woman looked close to my age. Most of her photos were professional. Conference events, business trips, dinners with colleagues. Mixed among them were pictures of Ryan, weekend outings, restaurants, a hiking trip from a few months earlier. The captions made my stomach turn. Lucky to have this man. Best weekend I've had in ages. So grateful for you. Friends were commenting about what a great couple they looked like. The second profile wasn't any better. Vacation photos, dinner dates, pictures that looked exactly like the kind of memories couples create when they believe they're building something serious. One photo had been posted less than a week earlier. Ryan had his arm around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling directly at the camera. The third profile hit hardest. A bouquet of flowers. A handwritten note. A caption thanking Ryan for always making her feel appreciated. By that point, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Every one of us believed we were in an exclusive relationship. Every one of us thought we knew who Ryan was. Every one of us was wrong. Lauren's next message was short. None of them know. A few seconds later, another appeared. Just like you didn't. Then, unexpectedly, I'm sorry. That simple apology affected me more than I expected. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But it was the first time anyone connected to this situation had acknowledged the damage being done. After sitting with everything for a while, I asked Lauren the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since she first contacted me. Why are you telling me? The typing bubble appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, she answered, because I've listened to him laugh about it. Another message followed. Every time one of you called, he'd hang up and joke about how easy it was. Then another. I kept telling myself it wasn't my business. But after 2 months, I couldn't pretend anymore. That was the moment I fully believed her. She wasn't gaining anything from this. If anything, exposing Ryan was going to make her own life more difficult. Before ending the conversation, I asked one final question. If you were me, what would you do? Her response arrived almost immediately. Lauren's answer came back almost immediately. Tell the others. I read it once and knew she was right. I spent the next hour staring at those 3 profiles, not trying to decide whether Ryan deserved protection. That decision had already been made for me. I was thinking about the women. If one of them had discovered this first, I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted somebody to tell me the truth. So I opened Instagram, attached every screenshot Lauren had sent, and wrote the same message to all 3 women. Hi, we don't know each other, but I think you deserve to see this. I've recently learned Ryan has been dating multiple women at the same time while presenting every relationship as exclusive. These screenshots explain what I've found. Whatever you choose to do with this information is completely up to you. I read it twice before sending it. No insults, no accusations, no emotional outburst, just facts. Then I hit send. 3 messages, 3 different lives, 3 different futures that were about to change. Afterward, I blocked Ryan everywhere. His number, his social media, every account I knew belonged to him. For the first time since receiving that original text, I felt strangely calm. The relationship was already over. I just hadn't known it yet. The first reply arrived less than 2 hours later. The woman responded while I was still finishing work for the day. Her message was cautious. She wanted proof. She wanted details. She wanted to know how long Ryan and I had been together. I answered every question honestly. Then she disappeared for several hours. That evening, another message arrived. Just 3 words. He admitted it. A few seconds later, she explained. She had called Ryan immediately after seeing the screenshots. At first, he denied everything. Then she started reading specific messages back to him. Eventually, he stopped arguing. That told her everything she needed to know. The second woman responded the following morning. Unlike the first, she wasn't cautious. She was furious. According to her, Ryan had been discussing moving in together. They'd spent months talking about future plans, cities they might live in, trips they wanted to take, goals they wanted to reach together. While we talked, another detail emerged. Money. Ryan had borrowed from her multiple times. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Emergency expenses, unexpected bills, temporary setbacks. By the time she added everything together, she had spent far more supporting him than she'd realized. And the more we compared notes, the clearer the pattern became. Ryan tailored himself to whoever he was talking to. With me, he was dependable and future-focused. With her, he was ambitious and struggling financially. With someone else, he became vulnerable and misunderstood. The more we compared notes, the clearer the strategy became. Ryan adjusted himself to fit whoever he was talking to, saying whatever was necessary to keep each relationship moving forward without allowing any of us to compare experiences. The third woman never replied. Her account suddenly went private. Every photo disappeared. Every public trace of her relationship with Ryan vanished overnight. Honestly, I understood. Not everyone responds to betrayal the same way. Some people demand answers. Others walk away without looking back. I respected that choice. What I didn't expect was how quickly Ryan's carefully constructed world began collapsing. The first sign came through one of his friends, a man I'd met several times during our relationship, someone I barely spoke to. His message was blunt. I think you've taken this too far. I read it twice before responding. What exactly did I do? The answer came immediately. You humiliated Ryan. That accusation would have carried more weight if Ryan hadn't created the situation himself. All I'd done was share information that came directly from him. I replied, Ryan humiliated himself. The conversation ended there. A day later, my phone rang from an unknown number. Normally, I ignore those calls. For some reason, I answered. The moment I heard the voice, I knew exactly who it was. Ryan. He sounded exhausted. The confident version of him I'd known for 2 years was gone. Natalie, what do you want? Several seconds passed before he spoke. Finally, he asked, Why would you do this? No apology. No explanation. Just anger about consequences. What exactly did I do? I asked. You sent those screenshots. I couldn't help noticing what he wasn't saying. He wasn't claiming they were fake. He wasn't claiming he was innocent. He wasn't denying anything. Because he couldn't. Instead, he focused entirely on the fallout. The screenshots were real, weren't they? I asked. A long pause followed. Then he muttered, That's not the point. I laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because somehow he still didn't understand. Ryan, that is the point. His frustration became obvious. You didn't have to tell everyone. That was when I asked the question he'd clearly been avoiding. How long were you planning to keep lying to all of us? No answer. Another month? Nothing. 6 months? Silence. A year? Still nothing. His silence told me more than any explanation could have. When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded smaller. Less defensive. Almost desperate. I was trying to figure things out. There it was. The excuse. The justification. The story he'd probably been telling himself for months. I thought about the women I'd spoken to, the futures they'd been promised, the money they'd spent, the trust they'd invested. Then I answered, No. I paused. You were trying to keep your options open. And for the first time since the call began, Ryan had absolutely nothing to say. After that phone call, I expected Ryan to disappear. Honestly, I thought he would finally understand there was nothing left to fix. The screenshots existed. The women had compared stories. The explanations had fallen apart. What more could he possibly say? As it turned out, quite a lot. Just not to me. Over the next couple of weeks, I started hearing from people I never expected to hear from. Some were women Ryan had dated. Others were mutual acquaintances who had slowly begun piecing together what had happened. The most surprising message came from the third woman, the one who had disappeared after receiving the screenshots. Nearly a week had passed without a word from her. Then one evening, her name appeared in my inbox. I wasn't ignoring you. I just needed time. I understood immediately. Some betrayals don't make you angry first. They make you question your own judgment. That's the harder part. Anger fades. Wondering how you missed something can stay with you much longer. We talked for almost 2 hours that night. Her experience sounded different on the surface, but underneath it was the same story. Ryan had presented himself as a completely different person. To her, he was the man who'd been hurt repeatedly by previous relationships. The man who wanted something real. The man who was tired of games. Reading her messages felt strangely familiar. Not because the details matched, because the emotions did. Every woman had received a customized version of Ryan. Whatever he thought would make him seem most appealing, that was the version he became. For a long time, it worked. Until people started comparing notes. At one point, she sent me an old screenshot. Ryan was talking about honesty, trust, loyalty, everything a healthy relationship supposedly needed. I couldn't help laughing. The contradiction was almost unbelievable. The same man giving lectures about honesty had spent months juggling multiple relationships behind everyone's backs. Eventually, our conversation moved beyond Ryan. We talked about how strange it felt to revisit memories that suddenly looked different. Moments that once felt meaningful now carried entirely different meanings. Promises that seemed sincere at the time now sounded rehearsed. That conversation helped more than I expected. It reminded me that I wasn't carrying the embarrassment alone. Ryan hadn't fooled one woman. He had fooled several intelligent, capable women at the same time. The issue wasn't that we were naive. The issue was that he had become very skilled at telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. A few days later, Lauren reached out again. By then, she was preparing to move into her new apartment. According to her, things inside Ryan's apartment had become unbearable. According to Lauren, Ryan spent most days angry, defensive, and obsessed with figuring out who had exposed him. For days, he blamed everyone except the person actually responsible. For days, he blamed everyone except himself. One day, it was another woman. The next day, it was mutual friends, social media, bad luck, or anyone else he could point to. Eventually, he figured out Lauren had been the source. "What happened?" I asked. Lauren's response was immediate. Exactly what you'd expect. She explained that Ryan had confronted her. At first, he tried to stay calm. He claimed she misunderstood the situation. Claimed everything was more complicated than it looked. Claimed he planned to tell everyone eventually. That explanation would have been funny if it wasn't so absurd. As though there was some future scenario where 4 women would gather together and thank him for finally being honest. Lauren wasn't interested. When the explanations failed, the anger started. Blame, accusations, claims that she'd ruined his life. None of that surprised me. What surprised me was what Lauren told me next. Do you know what bothered him most? What? He wasn't upset about losing the relationships. Another message appeared. He wasn't upset about hurting people either. Then the final one. He couldn't stop talking about the fact that everyone found out at the same time. That detail explained everything. Ryan wasn't mourning relationships. He was mourning control. For months, he'd been managing different versions of reality. Different stories, different promises, different futures. The entire system depended on people staying isolated from one another. The moment information started moving freely, the whole thing collapsed. That was what he couldn't accept. Around the same time, Samantha invited me out for coffee. Halfway through our conversation, she looked at me carefully and said, "You know what's weird?" "What?" "You don't sound heartbroken anymore." I started to disagree, then stopped. Because she was right. I was still hurt, still disappointed, still angry occasionally. But the overwhelming sadness from the first week was gone. After thinking about it, I understood why. I wasn't grieving Ryan anymore. I was grieving the person I believed Ryan was. The man I thought I'd been building a future with didn't actually exist. That version of him had been built on half-truths, omissions, and carefully managed stories. Accepting that didn't make things easy. It just made them clearer. A few days later, Ryan tried contacting me again, this time through email. The subject line read, "Please read." Curiosity got the better of me. The email was long, very long, paragraph after paragraph explaining how confused he'd been, how overwhelmed he felt, how difficult everything had become. At first, it sounded like an apology. The longer I read, the more obvious it became that the email was focused almost entirely on Ryan, his fears, his confusion, and how difficult the fallout had been for him. What the email never fully addressed was everyone else's experience. By the time I reached the end, one thing was obvious. Ryan wasn't writing because he finally understood what he'd done. He was writing because he hated the consequences. Those are not the same thing. I deleted the email without responding. A few weeks later, Lauren contacted me again, this time with someone else's information. "Someone wants to talk to you." A second message followed. "She dated Ryan before you." That conversation changed everything. The woman's name was Megan. She'd dated Ryan 3 years earlier, long before I entered the picture, long before any of the women I'd recently spoken with. Then she started sharing old screenshots, old emails, old conversations. Entire phrases Ryan had used with her later appeared in messages he'd sent me. Some of the promises were nearly identical. Even a few jokes were recycled. That realization hit harder than I expected. Some of my favorite memories weren't unique at all. They were part of a script he'd apparently been using for years. Megan eventually became suspicious. When she questioned him, he convinced her she was imagining things, convinced her she was insecure, convinced her she was overreacting. Over time, she stopped asking questions. Looking back, she could see the manipulation clearly. At the time, she couldn't. Neither could I. Most people don't immediately assume the person they love is lying to them. That's exactly why deception works. Before our conversation ended, one thing became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a temporary lapse in judgment. This wasn't a stressful period. This wasn't confusion. This was a long-established pattern. The only difference this time was that enough people finally shared information. When I told Samantha everything, she wasn't shocked. She simply shrugged. People like that survive because nobody ever sees the whole picture. She was right. Every woman saw her version. Every friend saw fragments. Nobody had the complete story. Until now. A week later, Lauren sent one final update before moving out. Ryan was leaving the apartment. Apparently staying there had become uncomfortable enough that he decided to start over somewhere else. When I read the message, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Relief. Not happiness. Not excitement. Just relief. The uncertainty was gone. The guessing was gone. The waiting was gone. The truth wasn't pleasant, but certainty was still better than confusion. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. A few days later, Ryan appeared somewhere he absolutely wasn't supposed to be, and our final conversation turned out to be nothing like I expected. I was leaving a coffee shop near my apartment when I heard someone say my name. I turned around. Ryan looked tired. Not physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes from watching your choices catch up to you. "Can we talk?" he asked. Part of me wanted to walk away. Another part wanted closure. So I agreed. 5 minutes. That was all. We sat across from each other near the window. After a long pause, Ryan finally spoke. "I know you probably hate me." The answer surprised even me. "I don't." He looked confused. "I was hurt," I said. "I was angry. But hate takes energy, and I'm tired of giving this situation any more of mine." For the first time, he looked away. Eventually, he admitted what neither of us could avoid. I messed everything up. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was closer than anything I'd heard before. Then he asked a question I didn't expect. "When did you stop loving me?" I thought about it carefully. Then I shook my head. "That's not what happened." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I didn't stop loving you all at once." I took a breath. "I stopped recognizing you." That landed harder than anything else I'd said. Because it was true. The man sitting across from me wasn't the person I'd imagined for 2 years. That version had only existed inside the story he'd created. After a while, Ryan quietly asked, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" I considered the question, then answered honestly, "I think you made selfish choices. I think you hurt a lot of people. And I think you spent so much time trying to keep every option available that you never considered what it was costing everyone else." He nodded slowly. Then, after another long pause, "I really did care about you. A year earlier, those words would have meant everything. Now they felt different. Not meaningless. Just late. Very late." "I believe you," I said. His eyes lifted. "You do?" "Yes." Then I added, "I think you cared about all of us." That ended the discussion, because we both knew exactly what I meant. Caring wasn't the issue. Honesty was. Respect was. Commitment was. A few minutes later, Ryan stood. I should go. Neither of us dragged it out. Neither of us needed to. At the door, he stopped one last time. "I really am sorry, Natalie." This time I believed him. Some people are genuinely sorry. That doesn't mean they get another chance. I know. Ryan nodded and left. That was the last time I ever saw him. Several months have passed since then. Lauren settled into her new apartment. The other women moved forward with their lives. Samantha still checks on me every week. And me? I'm doing better than I expected. Healing wasn't immediate. Rebuilding trust took even longer, and learning to stop blaming myself turned out to be one of the hardest parts of the entire experience. But eventually I understood something important. Losing Ryan wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy would have been never learning the truth. It would have been spending years building a future with someone who still viewed commitment as a backup plan. The relationship ending hurt. There's no point pretending otherwise. But losing more years to a lie would have hurt much more. Sometimes I think back to that original message. I need space to focus on myself. At the time, it felt like the worst text I'd ever received. Now I see it differently. Looking back, that text message wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped building a future around a lie. Ryan got the space he wanted. I got the truth. Looking back, I think I got the better deal.